Welcome to the AI Frame podcast, a space where we explore how founders, innovators, and investors are navigating the world of artificial intelligence. Each episode brings you thoughtful conversations with people redefining how technology meets strategy, separating what's real from what is noise. I'm Ana Rojo-Taurua, doctor in mathematics, AI consultant and strategist, and your host. So grab a coffee and let's frame the future of AI together. Today's guest is someone I wanted to bring into this podcast for a long time. Someone who doesn't just talk about AI ethics, but actually has an impact on how we embed it into the systems we build, fund, and deploy. I'm joined by Sidrah Hassan, AI ethicist, speaker, part of the Digital Leaders AI 100 UK, Women in the AI Ethics Fellow, and honestly, one of the clearest voices we have right now when it comes to making AI safe, fair, and actually useful for everyone, not just a privileged few. So today, we're going to unpack the gap between ethical frameworks and actual practice, the messy realities organizations face, and what it really means to build AI responsibly. I'm so excited for this one, so let's dive in. Welcome to the pod, Sidrah. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. My heart is beating after that introduction. I'm like, wow, that woman sounds impressive. I don't know if that's me, but yeah, thank you.
You are most welcome. So I want to start the podcast asking you, who are you and what's your mission?
I've been asked this question so many times and I still don't have like a refined answer. I would say I am a hopeful technologist. I work in technology at the intersection of society, technology, and probably a bit of research as well. Really understanding how technology impacts people's lives, but especially marginalised communities and vulnerable communities. And by that, I mean ethnic minorities, communities who are disabled, neurodivergent. And that's really because of my own lived experience. So I am first generation Pakistani Muslim, born in the UK, or born in Scotland. And my lived reality of racism and exclusion has followed me throughout my life in different ways. And that's really shaped what my core motivations are, which are fairness, justice, and really not just equality, but equity. How can we make sure it's not about everybody starting from a level playing field if that playing field is fundamentally different for everyone, right? There's a really good infographic that I think most people will have seen, and it's like someone has a ladder, but then there's a fish in a fishbowl where you can give that fish a ladder, it doesn't make any difference, yes. Right? So it's really understanding those kind of barriers that maybe might not be so obvious. So that's really what has shaped what I do and what I'm passionate about. So I studied international politics and public policy, and then I went on to do a master's in public policy. And I really wanted to work at, the United Nations or the EU. And then I realized that I didn't speak another European language, to my detriment. And I didn't have parents who could bankroll my internships in Brussels. So I found myself in technology accidentally. I joined like a management consultant program. And from there, literally the first week of my graduate scheme, there was a mentor who was talking about digital ethics. And I was like, wow. This is what I want to do, like this. So I knew almost 7 years ago that that's what I wanted to be doing. I just didn't know how to get there. So the introduction you did sounds so impressive put together, but actually it's 7 years of like building blocks that have led to myself being here, sat with you, having this conversation. And it's been from the motivation of, I know that technology impacts people differently. And like Silicon Valley's mantra of move fast and break things leaves behind broken glass. And I am all too familiar with the people who have to walk on that broken glass. And it's really my motivation to sweep that broken glass aside and make sure that nobody has to walk on it.
When we talk about technology, we talk a lot about accessibility and putting technology in people's hand. But the way that you give technology to people and the way that people receive it, depending on where their position, their background, their culture, their, socio-economic status, all of these things has a different impact. And in terms of AI, now that we are trying to make AI accessible to everyone, and because AI is embedded in absolutely every single thing that we're doing, I think it's important to address, okay, how people have access to that and how we make sure that people are not getting behind, that they really have the same opportunities as other people, and how we make it actually accessible.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I think an analogy that I really like to use is when companies make furniture or like anything that is going to be used by humans. So that could be like these glasses or spoons is a really good example. Those spoons are made ergonomically, which means it's made to fit the shape, dexterity, all of those kind of accessibility considerations of the person that's going to be using it. But I feel like those same considerations are not applied to technology oftentimes. And actually, it feels more like, how can we get humans to bend around this technology? Before it's been social media, before that it's been the internet, so many examples, and now it's AI, rather than the other way around, which it should be. So with this AI thing, you're absolutely right. We're seeing AI, penetrate so many different areas of our lives. It's probably the number one conversation I hear when I'm just out and about, whether I'm taking a bus, whether I'm walking. I hear people talking about different AI use cases in their lives, right? Whether they ChatGPT'd a recipe or whether it's something more technical or something less technical. Even when I go home to my parents, my mum's like, why do you always say ChatGPT is bad? It's so good. I use it for this, and this. It's been so helpful. So it's this, we're at this precipice where actually nobody was using a spoon to eat soup, and now they've been given a spoon. But it's so important that we make sure that everybody can use that spoon, because that's the only way they're going to be able to eat this soup. So that it's this foresight, or watching these trends happen and seeing AI really growing in the different industries it's in and different areas that it impacts. And I imagine that it'll end up diffusing, kind of like the internet, where it's really part of, it's embedded, kind of like electricity as well. And as a result, how can we mitigate as many obstacles to people using it as equitably as someone else? Because when we build technology, the global majority is not what's used to model how our digital landscape looks like. So really, it has a Eurocentric bias, it has a global minority bias, and everything is really catered to how America, the UK, the EU really use technology. But if we're going to be creating such an unprecedented technology, we need to look way further, and we need to make sure that the majority of people are included around the world. To flip that as well, a really good lesson to have in mind when you're building these kinds of technologies that are going to have such unprecedented consequences and effects in people's lives is, if you build for the minority, you're automatically building for the majority.
We have approached this from a societal lens, I would say. So what about companies? Because I know you work with organizations, right, directly. So what do you think are the biggest ethical challenges that organizations face, especially when they are building in the AI space?
On a day-to-day implementing and executing AI use cases, it's really about the data and the data governance that these companies have. So there'll be two types of data that most companies are using. It's either proprietary, so it's data that they've gathered either on their own organization, on their customers, on their clients that they want to use to get better insights, or it is data that they've scraped from wherever that may be. Again, usually in line with whatever products or services that they offer and what industry they kind of operate within. And really, it's understanding that data is not neutral. So data in itself has a lot of biases, from different kind of human biases to knowledge gaps in there. It's not a true representation of the people that are in that data set or the behaviors that are in that data set. So I think the first and foremost thing is that I go in and I want to understand what the data governance landscape looks like for that organization. Because I've worked with organizations who have, like 6 data scientists, and they've got data stewards, and they've got this whole data governance policy, and they're really quite far in the maturity scale. I've also worked with companies who have none of that at all, and actually they have data, they don't know what to do with it. It's literally in spreadsheets. So it's understanding what their data governance looks like, meeting them where they're at in that maturity scale, and then understanding what are the next steps that we need to put in place. You know, if you're really mature, maybe we need to just review your data governance policy, or you tell us what are the gaps right now that you're facing, and we can iterate on that, and then we can understand how actually what's the best AI use case, what models can we use to plug that in and give you the insights that you're looking for. When it comes to the AI itself, I think with the companies that I've worked with, a lot of the times the AI technology that they're using, it's not in-house. It's, you know, plug and play type of technology, which is fair because, again, in Scotland, the maturity level, I would say, is early adoption and testing and iteration.
Yep.
So therefore, there's not a lot of, you know, what does your models look like and how can we put in adjusting model weights and things like that. It's not quite as advanced as that. It's more looking at, okay, the AI tools that you've got, how can we make sure that they're representing your data like set in the training phase as accurately as it can. So actually there what we're doing is more back to front. We're looking at the outputs and using them to test. Is it representative of your fairness, like testing? Is it auditable? Are we mitigating bias the way we want to? Is this representing, again, the demographic in your data that you're trying to represent? So really it's more understanding how is this AI tool interpreting your data and how is it optimizing for the insights that you want? And can we, like, at that point, I'll look at risk registers and, you know, risk assessment. That's when you start to think about what do we need to do here to make sure we're getting to the best possible answer. But also, because these technologies are quite new and they're evolving quite quickly, it has to be an iterative process. So it's one where you need to follow the life cycle of these AI use cases, implementation, adoption, and understand what that looks like. And then I think outside of that more technical element, going further and looking at what does your AI governance look like, because it's not necessarily the same as your data governance, there's an evolution. And then how do you look at privacy, you know, preserving? How do you make sure that you can really build that trust with your not only your customers, but also your employees and your organization? It's really then building up that framework. What are your principles that are right for your organization that you want your AI to adhere to? AI ethics is not just about the technical robustness and feasibility of your solution, but the culture, the literacy, and all of those human values that are around it. They really underpin whether your AI adoption is going to be successful or not. We know this just generally from the history of like working in digital sector, right? When you bring about a change, there's a whole change management that has to happen around it. And that can be siloed to one organization, as in it can be as simple as we're migrating from on-prem to cloud. So there's a whole culture change that needs to happen there. There needs to be like shifting attitudes. You need to bring your employees along the journey with you. But with AI, again, that seems like it's everywhere right now. Like it's outside of work, inside of work. It's probably what you're thinking about at least once a week. That requires a much more holistic approach. And that goes back to that trust, because essentially how humans make those bonds and relationships is by trusting each other. Like if you build that rapport and if I trust you, then I'm more likely to listen to you and not necessarily do what you say, but listen to what you have to say and then understand how that fits into what I can give and how it impacts me.
Ethical AI is not just about the technical side of things, it's also about the human side of things. Trust is such an important success metric when it comes to AI adoption, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do with AI is actually trying to mimic human behavior. It's so important as well in AI systems because it's kind of like another quality that we are expecting with AI solutions.
Some people already trust AI more than humans. And we see this in cases such as therapy being the number one use case. Actually, a lot of people will say, and I've kind of read a few studies and kind of reports on this as well, where they feel more comfortable opening up to an AI chatbot than they do a human. And now there's many layers that go into this all. of course.
With the psychology layers.
Yes, absolutely. Sure. Which I am not an expert on by any means. So, but it's just to emphasize the point that I think even with trust, there's probably subcomponents and there's probably nuance in there. And it's such a big topic because actually I feel like a lot of people, a lot of users and consumers probably will trust AI systems already because there's this sycophancy approach. So you're being validated with what you're saying. And again, that plays into our human psyche. When we get validation, we feel better about ourselves. We feel more confident with that kind of process. The world is just really difficult right now from like social economic factors. Therapists are not very accessible either. So this is a very convenient and efficient way to maybe have an outlet for some of the problems that you're facing that you don't feel others understand.
And you take away the judging side of things.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting with these like frontier AI companies as well. I think was it last year at some point when X or like Grok and OpenAI started to review some of their policies about being politically neutral and having a bit of a balanced, answers and their training data, etc. Some of those policies were revised, and you've seen a bit more of a shift to right-wing views having more weight, and therefore, so I think back then I was thinking, will it be a case where, like newspapers, you just pick the LLM that actually serves your worldview better? So that's another element to it as well. And again, different people are going to trust Grok more than Claude, for example. Even that trust can be used in such different ways, and it's really then understanding what is your company's goal, like what's the end thing that you want to happen. Trust is easier to advise on and build into systems when I'm working more locally with companies. So, a lot of the times companies that I work with, they're trying to make things either efficient for their employees and easier, like, we have an intranet and that's all we have. Documents are difficult to come by. Processes are quite archaic in a way. This will help us bring us into the kind of, 21st century and really make the employee experience better. Okay, great. This is how we can embed trust. We can look at transparency. We can have these policies. We can adopt AI by giving this benefits to your employees, etc. So in that sense, it's more straightforward. But when I look at trust on this more macro level, when it comes to how the frontier AI companies are running, how politicians are weighing in on AI, is very interesting. I think that it's more... who's sponsoring this?
Something I really like about your LinkedIn profile is that you want AI to be for everyone and not for the privileged ones.
Yeah.
Where do you see the biggest gaps right now in terms of access, representation, and who gets listened to in the AI space?
The global minority.
Right.
Again and again. So UK, US, EU. And I think, to be fair, even with the UK, which we're seeing this rhetoric play out a little bit, we feel like we're lagging behind in this so-called race. So really it's the US really leading forefront, China as well. But we see this play out, and again, the internet and any kind of digital, like the industrial revolution, we see that there's a global minority bias, right? And it leaves out the global majority. And that, again, we're seeing that problem play out in real time again. So there are very little ways for the global majority to actually have tangible impact in how these technologies are built out unless they create their own proprietary models. It's quite disheartening to see that that is still playing out again and again. And it's not, there's an opportunity to really work together on this, and this is probably where my interest and expertise in the AI governance space probably plays in, that there's a way that we can work together to actually have this technology benefit everyone. Because in the hopefully unlikely case that there are risks from AI, like catastrophic levels of risk, you're going to need to work together. It's not going to be the US saves the rest of the world, unfortunately. By itself, like a slice of Swiss cheese has holes in different areas. But if you layer it up, then you bring like a really robust defense mechanism, right?
I like that one.
Yeah, and it's quite common in the AI safety, so I can't claim it. Understanding that we're just recreating the same biases and entrenching the same inequality and extractionism that we've seen previously. A book that is so close to my heart, that does such a great job of exploring and explaining these gaps, and it's quite accessible as well, is The Empire of AI by Karen Howe. So she was a journalist in the US who started profiling OpenAI right at the beginning when they kind of came about in 2015.
Right.
And her book is part a profile on OpenAI, Sam Altman, and the kind of workings of that company, but it also looks at the impact of AI and the whole AI supply chain in the global majority. So actually, she goes out to speak to people in like Venezuela and the African continent as well, to understand how is the lived experience of data labelers and annotators, and those where AI data centers exist, you know, exacerbating the kind of strain that those areas already have. And it's a fantastic, fantastic book. But really it highlights that the gaps are not new. They're just happening and being rehashed again. And there's no kind of tangible ways for global majority to like have influence on policy or have a say in how these models are built. I think it will be interesting. So India is hosting the next AI Global Forum. So it will be interesting to see how that hopefully starts to bring players from different regions into the conversation. I would say India still has a privilege compared to other places like continents in Africa. There are so many other players that could have a really positive impact on how this technology is shaped, and we're missing that. Like, so for example, only 67% of the world is online. That is majoritively, so 97% is Europe, Central Asia, and America. And only 37% of sub-Saharan Africa is actually online. If you're scraping data from the web to build these models and it's going to serve the world, that's a major like part of the world that you're not missing. Serving. Exactly. Yeah. So like, again, goes back to like what I said earlier about data is not neutral. So that really represents some of those gaps.
How important is to have culture embedded into the models to make sure that we have outcomes that really matter and that are meaningful, especially for particular communities and particular countries with a particular culture, their religion, because if not, using just a generalistic model, it just doesn't work because it's not capturing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this was about maybe 2 years ago, I want to say, a year and a half to 2 years ago, I saw an article about this entrepreneur creating Black GPT because ChatGPT did not represent the nuances of the African diaspora and their cultural, historical context in those nuances. So he was building this kind of LLM specifically centered on that context. So absolutely. And I think it's this question of, which is not new, it's been happening in the field for years, but if we're trying to model artificial intelligence on human intelligence, but we have not even been able to define what the parameters and benchmarks of human intelligence are, and then how can we claim or how can we work to represent that in an artificial intelligence system, right?
Exactly.
And I find it quite funny from a kind of, I don't know, just a human side, that we'll hear quite a lot in different in different aspects of our life, that what makes you unique is how you think and how you see the world.
Yep.
But we're also at the same time now trying to standardize that. We're trying to create a template so that we can then replicate it in AI. And all of a sudden, the conversation stops becoming about efficiency and making your life easier and like progress, and it becomes something which feels a little bit more sinister, a bit more icky.
If you want to build your own large language model, you need lots of infrastructure, lots of computer power. You need probably lots of money to do that. Not everyone has access to all of that. And then the part of being unique, this is being destroyed in the last couple of years. We're losing a particular type of creativity. We're losing a particular type of creative thinking, critical thinking. And we're seeing that we are losing that uniqueness of people when they just give in into generative AI. And not only that, because the models get retrained with that data that has already been generated with AI, we're feeding into that and reinforces that illusion of uniqueness.
I was speaking about this exact thing with an AI researcher, and I think that we were coining it as cognitive offload.
Right.
So really like offloading that creativity and critical analysis and the ways in which, that muscle of taking in data, understanding it the way that in your unique way you would, which is influenced by many different factors, and then coming to a decision.
Yeah.
And how that's going to affect even children who will be AI native. In fact, my child is an AI native, I guess.
Right.
So how that will impact, these kids growing up, going through schooling. Obviously, AI in education is a big thing, a contentious one. And I have my views on it, of course, but how that is going to infiltrate, how children are going to interact with it, use it, and what that does to their critical analysis. I think you probably will have seen the MIT study, I think.
Yeah.
It was MIT where they had the brain scans of people who used generative AI or LLMs and those who didn't, and what that did to their neural signals in their brains.
Yeah.
And then there was another study as well where they had doctors using LLMs to assist with their consultants, I think it was, day-to-day work. So they kind of measured them doing their day-to-day activities without LLMs, gave them LLMs, took those LLMs away and monitored them at each stage, and realized that after taking the LLMs away, the critical thinking and the judgments was actually poorer than before LLM use, because those consultants had become reliant on the LLMs. And again, it's that if you're not using that muscle, what is happening? Because we've not really measured it to this level before. And it's really interesting and it's scary. And that's why we see some of these conversations happening in the creative industries, especially. OpenAI signed the deal with Disney, and what that means for actors. So they're able to now take that data, right? Copyrighted data, and what that means for the actors and creatives. Did the creatives who are on the Disney streaming services, did they give consent? Is that part of their terms and conditions? But that's it. So then when AI has access to all of that and it's just reproducing the creativity, what does that then mean in the future? And I think there was an article I saw a little while ago, and it was on BBC Introducing, which I think they introduced up and coming artists. They introduced and gave a good amount of time to an artist who had generated his music using LLMs. There was a big kind of heated discussion around that and what that means for the future of up and coming artists, and what the benefits and the consequences. So yeah, I think cognitive offloading is definitely something that I think about, and I imagine it's going to be an area of research that's going to kind of grow as we see how this affects people. On my LinkedIn at the bottom, which hopefully reads as a joke, because
I did read it,
yeah, and I'm like, oh, look at me being funny. It says all views are my own, not created by an algorithm.
Yeah.
And again, do you know what? I've just seen both sides of the argument on this, where it doesn't matter because it's just conveying your ideas and helping you polish it. But actually, I feel like I naturally gravitate to people who have written, their thoughts, experiences, and their posts just feel a bit unfiltered.
Yeah.
And it feels rough and ready. I feel again, it comes back to trust. Then I trust it more, and it makes me have a connection with the stranger on the internet that I've never met. The amount of times I've commented on people's posts who I'm not even connected with, they're somebody else's connection, because their post has resonated with me. And it's about their experience, and it's about how they feel, because I think at the end of the day, it's those human things that really connect us. I had an inclination towards, not that I've studied philosophy or anything like that, but for having philosophical conversations, I really enjoy it. I'm religious, so kind of spirituality, all that. But I see how much more important it is now, because actually that is the basis of my trust and conversations with people.
Yeah.
When I get to know more about them past that layer of just that surface level.
I feel like faith actually helps people feel connected to humans and feel grounded and stay in the real world.
Yeah, and it's hard because it's so easy to use something that validates you, right?
Yes.
Like, I'm really conscious of how I write, and I'm always like, it doesn't sound right. I write very authentically, in the sense I write very much like how I speak, and it has a lot of like my personal feelings and anecdotes and analogies like mixed in. Not everybody's cup of tea to read, so that's fine. So I always get my husband to proofread, even honestly, even if I'm doing a LinkedIn post, the amount of time it takes me to do one post, and I'm like, can you please read this? And
Husband GPT.
Yeah, husband GPT, exactly. And he'll read it, or like he'll read a blog, and then he'll be really critical. And it pisses me off. It grinds my gears because he is so pedantic, and he's like, I don't know if this word sounds right here or not. And recently I've come to really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's what AI can't give me.
Yes.
And just reinforces that what I'm saying is right. Again, back to that sycophancy, right?
Yeah.
He's actually helping break that bubble. And it is uncomfortable, and it is annoying and frustrating. And it's not, as humans, a place that we like to be in. We like to be in a place where we're feeling validated and feeling good about ourselves. It's such a necessary abrasive that we need to grow.
Yeah.
So I think in the future of work, future of teaching, future of all of these things of growing, I would like to and hope that we see a return and emphasis on this like abrasiveness, that we need something that challenges us. That's how we develop as human beings, right? Like, again, you'll see this in the hero's journey, and whatever movie, book, or kind of TV show that you watch. It's when the main character, the hero, go through a shit time. That's when they're really being molded, right? That's when they're really learning, and they're uncomfortable, and their back's against the wall. But that's when they are then getting ready for their like hero's arc. Like, that's when something amazing is about to happen, right? That's their origin story. Actually, like, that's really important to being human and how we grow. And that's so necessary.
I feel that we could talk forever, and I should totally bring you for the next season of the AI Frame podcast. I feel like we could actually have a podcast together because this has been amazing. But just for the interest of time, I think we're going to leave it here. But thank you so much for sharing all this with us. Not many people think about this side of AI, the more like ethical, responsible, and more human side of things. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to the AI Friend podcast. If you like this episode, follow the show and share with someone who would love it too. I'm Ana Rojo Turua, and I'll see you next time for another conversation that reframes how we think about AI.